All right.
All
So
right.
go ahead and tell us the story about being integrated into Destrehan High School.
Okay. I guess the first thing, well, you have to know, and you probably do know, is historically, especially in the 50s and early 60s, well, even late 60s, Norco was a very, very segregated town. There was the Diamond area where I lived, directly across the street from the chemical plant, and there was what we call the white section. And the only school that I ever knew was Bethune High School, which was actually a block and a half from my house on Washington Street. Uh, and in terms of the racial stuff that was going on at that time, I felt people always asked me, "Gee, Rodney, it must have been really terrible growing up in Southern Louisiana, in with racism and all of the stuff going on and the bullwhips and people color water fountains and separate bathrooms and sitting in the back of the bus, which I actually did." But I tell people it wasn't really, because I lived in an all-black neighborhood. I went to school with all black kids. Most of the people in the black part of Norco were relatives. So for me, my childhood was pretty idyllic. It simply was, because I did not really have contact with white people. Uh, until I went to Destrehan, I don't really recall even speaking to a white person. It was like that. We went to Schwagman Brothers to the grocery store, and we ventured out into the quote unquote white world, uh, to buy stuff. But I never really had any kind of personal or interaction with a white person until I went to Destrehan, and that was one of the most actually powerful lessons I learned. Just because white people were aliens to me, as I'm sure they were to just about every black kid in that neighborhood. So when the letter came around, I guess this might have been yeah, it must have been in '66, when the freedom of choice edict finally filtered down to Louisiana, and the letter came offering well, I guess it wasn't just Bethune students. It was any student the opportunity to attend any school that they wanted. But of course, back then that meant if the black kids wanted to go to a white school, that was fine because it was pretty clear none of the white kids were coming to Bethune. Uh, and so I remember getting uh, getting the letter from the superintendent of schools or whatever, and my mom read it, and she just handed it to me. She didn't say a word. She just handed it to me, and I read it, and she said, "What do you want to do?" and I and I said, "Well, I think I want to go." And so I I remember getting on the bus because I'd never ridden the school bus before because we didn't have to. I walked a block and a half to school. So just being on that bus and you know and having to ride 5 miles to school, which seemed a lot longer back then, to Destrehan, uh, it was just a whole new experience. And I don't really remember the first day of school at Destrehan. Uh, I just remember being terrified. Like I said, I had no experience with white people. I had never been to. Uh, I had no idea what the academics would be like. I was sort of like one of the smartest kids at Bethune, but I had no idea, what the academics were like at Destrehan. Uh, and so, when I got there, it was sort of everything was sort of a haze from class to orientation to, just the whole first day experience was just a fog. But eventually, I got used to it. People ask me, how was it, integrating a high school? Uh, and I think there were three of us, uh, Deborah Dennis, Russell Vinette, and I, who were the first in the junior class. And so we were the first in the first group to graduate because I don't believe in the first year they placed any seniors there. I, which made sense because it would have been in the middle of the semester. They didn't do it at the beginning of the year. They did it in January, February, whenever the second semester started. And so, but once I got there, I was a pretty perceptive kid even then, and I quickly realized that the school population, with regard to me and to the other black kids who were attending, they're pretty much in three categories. Uh, the first category, which was the vast majority of the kids, the white kids, they just didn't pay any attention. They just sort of went about their business. We were just sort of there, and they didn't bother us one way or the other. Uh, the second category of kids were the kids that gave me a hard time, uh, and but I pretty quickly realized that the kids who were giving me the hard time, or should I say, giving us the hard time, were kids who, in the general social strata of the school, were considered, the quote unquote losers. You know how high school have cliques. They were sort of at the bottom of the social totem pole. And my guess is that when we got there, they said, "Oh, somebody's lower than us," but that didn't last very long because they weren't getting any reaction, and they weren't really being supported by the other students. And the third category was my bandmates. Uh, the band room was my sanctuary. The band room is where I developed friends that I still have to this day. Uh, and they really respected me as a musician. And that was a very powerful thing to me. And I remember getting there, and I, played a flute. I still played a flute, and we auditioned, to see who played what chair. First chair, second chair, third chair, and I remember after my audition, Mr. Watney, Mr. Watney was the band director back then, and he assigned me first chair flute, and I was concerned that the people who were playing first chair flute before I got there, Jan Martin and Melody Walker, who are still friends of mine, would, you know, be a little upset about it, but it was exactly the opposite. They just said, "Wow, this is great," and it makes me almost make you cry just to think about it. But that was where I really, really got an education around race and around what's important and around friendship. Uh, and I found that my fear about the academics was really unfounded. I can't remember. I think I graduated fifth in the class. I can't remember. But the one subject that I was really behind in was mathematics. Uh, and I remember spending the summer between my junior year, the one semester I had spent at Destrehan, and the senior year, teaching myself geometry. I bought one of those Sham or whatever it was books, and every morning I'd sit down and I go to the geometry book and taught myself geometry, uh, and it was wonderful. I said, "Wow, this is pretty cool." It was just great learning without a teacher because I could go at my own pace, and you know, one of the earlier examples of self-paced learning, as they call it now. Uh, but that was the only place I was behind. I was a very good writer, and yeah, there's this incident. This is kind of related. I was in English class. I think it's probably my senior year, and the English teacher was named Miss Donaldson, and I think she later got married, became Mrs. Landry. And one morning she came into class, and she said to the class, "Today, class, we're going to do something different. Today, you're going to write an essay, what it means to be an American." And my first thought was, "Oh, she doesn't have a lesson plan for today." And so, we all started writing. I was a good writer, still am, and I knew what teachers wanted. Sort of blood of my patriotic Americans in the green grass and the blood and the whole patriotic thing. And I just turned it in. I didn't even think about it. And a few weeks later, we were at an assembly in the gym. I think that's where it was. I can't remember if there was a separate auditorium or I knew about doing the gym and the auditorium were one and the same, but I think Destrehan had a separate building for the auditorium. And I was in a band because we always played at the assemblies. And I was sitting with the flute section with Jan and Melody. We were just sort of not really paying attention. And this guy from the American Legion got on stage and went to the microphone. Very, very, very old white guy. And he said, and now the winners of the American Legion essay contest, what it means to be an American. Rodney Mashia, nobody. And I wasn't really paying attention. And Jan, still my friend, she lives in California now. Rodney, you won. I said, what are you talking about? She said, get up there. And so I go up on stage, and the guy wasn't looking at, he was paying attention to something else, and he turned around and looked at me. And the look on his face was priceless. I would never forget that. And, it was weird because he knew he had to shake my hand. And it was clear from his body language and everything on his face that he wasn't expecting, because it was never happened before. But he shook my hand, and the band just went crazy. The band just went crazy, yeah. And that's a moment of my entire experience at Destrehan, that was one of the best. Because that's when I felt supported, I felt cared for, I felt loved, I felt respected. Respect was a big thing, as a black person, even now. And the whole Destrehan experience was really a very transformative one for me. It changed my life. There's no doubt about that. One of the things that happened was that I won a National Achievement Scholarship. And I'm not even sure that they even offered the test at Bethune. I just don't know. I haven't checked in with anybody. I should have, because I was back home actually a few weeks ago for a family reunion. So I was actually in Destrehan for Labor Day weekend. And I saw a lot of people I know. But had I not gotten that scholarship, I'm not sure how I would have ended up, because my parents couldn't really afford to send me to college. I'm guessing I would have gone to a community college or something, but it would have been a very different experience, educationally anyway. So, and it wasn't all roses. It wasn't all lightness and light. But all in all, there were very few incidences. There were some teachers, a couple, who were clearly not pleased that I was there. One gym teacher whose name I won't go into, but I remember, I'm laughing now, but felt crazy then. I don't know if this was part of phys ed before we got there or after. But for phys ed, every now and then he said, oh, it's batter ball day. Batter, Batter, batter ball. And the way batter ball worked is that you put two black kids, me and Russell, and the rest of the white kids in the gym. You threw out a whole shitload of volleyballs, and the only rule of batter ball is that you couldn't take more than 3 running steps before you could wheel the volleyball at anybody you wanted to. It was like dodgeball gone mad. Only you couldn't dodge because there were 20 kids. And it was, it got kind of wild in the very beginning, but, after a few weeks, I didn't quite blend in, but the kids realized that was no fun. It was just wasn't, and most of the kids were decent, so, they weren't really, but I remember the first time it happened, I got hit, not because people were trying to hurt me, but I was just fascinated by the fact that every time and they were shirtless, one of the white kids got hit with the ball, there was this red spot that would appear. And I had, I had never seen a shirtless white kid before, and I was just, wow, look at that, and it was just a whole new world. And white people literally were aliens to me at that point. Uh, and I remember sitting in class, especially the first day, uh, just looking out and seeing different colored hair, different styles of hair, which was not really seen in the black community. It was either kind of Afro-ish, or you have a thing they call waves. You brush it down, which I did, and so just to see the variations in hair and style and color, you know, it was just a. I just remember sitting there being fascinated at one point when the teachers called on me. I had no idea if she was calling them. Because I was like just lost in this, you know, the newness of it all, the newness of the experience, and the uniqueness compared to my past. So, but like I said, the band was my saving grace in my sanctuary, and I remember it provided me with a lot of experiences that I probably would not have had. Uh, Bethune did not have a marching band because we didn't have a football team. Uh, uh, and Destrehan had a band, a marching band and a football team. And I had never been to a football game, obviously, and I had never marched in a marching band. I never, worn a uniform, so we had to wear this uniform. I remember going home with this note uh, to my mother saying that I needed to have a pair of white bucks, white shoes. You had to wear white shoes. That was part of the uniform. And I didn't have any white shoes, and I didn't even know where to buy white shoes. Uh, but I think we ended up going to this store in Kinnera, can't remember exactly, and finding white shoes, and I put on the uniform, and I looked at the uniform, and I saw my black face, and it was just sort of wow, this is something. And I remember the first, not not the first football game, the first college football game. For some reason, we were invited to march at LSU in Baton Rouge at a football game, a college football game, which I had never been to. I'd never been to LSU. I don't think at that point I'd even been to, well, I might have been to Baton Rouge for like a band contest or something. But I just remember being on the bus and getting off the bus, and there's all these other marching bands in different color uniforms, and looking around and not seeing any other black person uh, in any of the other bands. And I remember watching the football game. I think they played the Miami Hurricanes, and I think me and some of the football players were the only black people in the entire stadium, if I recall. I'm not even sure there were even, yeah, there must have been black players on the team at that point, LSU. But I'm not even sure about that. I was sort of in a different state of mind, so I was. But it was. I just remember that very, very clearly. Just looking around in this vast stadium. I had never seen anything like that. You know, I was from Norco. There was not no structure like that anywhere near where I lived, uh, and just looking at the immensity of the stadium, the thousands and thousands of people, hundreds and hundreds of kids in different uniforms from different schools, and me. I think Russell was in it too. I think he played the drums, bass drum or something, and just looking around and saying, "Whoa, where am I? What am I doing here?" but but all in all, like I said, Defterham was a life changing, transformative experience for me, and you know, it's not something I can ever forget. I made amazing friends. Uh, I mentioned Jan, and I my partner and I at the time actually went out to see her in California, and she visited me and my family when we were living in New Hampshire. She came to my 60th birthday party. This is the woman who played flute, who was first chair flute before I got there, and it was just I keep using the word transformative, uh, but that word is truly applicable for me. Uh, it truly was.
All right. I had to figure out how to unmute myself. Rodney,
Uh,
that was incredible. Like the story about you winning as far as like the letter and going up and shaking hands. And I guess this doesn't have too much to do. So with batter ball, were they intentionally aiming at the two students in the middle, or were they aiming across with those two
oh no,
students?
there was no structure to this. This is
Ah,
just no. You just
but
went any way you want. There was no, there was, like I said, the only rule was that you couldn't take more than 3 running steps before you could wham the ball at anyone you wanted to, as far as you wanted to. But the
right, but
ball,
they almost
yeah,
like
almost
like
everybody had a ball at that.
yeah. And if they were throwing it across, they almost
Yeah,
like you were
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
there. Oh
yeah,
wow,
yeah.
that is incredible. I'm so sorry you had to go through all that, but that is
Yeah, like I
just
said, it was, it sounds terrible, but after the first few times, I guess they got bored or they just realized that it wasn't any fun,
I mean,
and they just sort of, went back to the regular ways, you know, throwing at
absolutely.
each
But
other.
again, no one should have to get used to that or anything.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, I understand. Yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah,
oh my
yeah.
gosh. But I'm so glad you had band. I mean, I was a
Oh
huge
yeah, yeah. It
band
was my
kid. And
savior. I don't know what I would have done without that.
I thought it was important to me, but I mean, hearing these stories for you, I mean, that's like you were saying, transformative. I'm so glad you had that support system. I'm so glad they, accepted you when it was, it was kind of new to them. But I'm really glad that
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
had that
yeah,
support system. So,
yeah. And I learned a lot about myself. As a black person, growing up in the '50s in the South, there's a lot of, at least for me, a lot of, because of the messages you get, from the culture,
mhm.
it's very easy to feel less than. And, and I took that to Destrehan with me. And I remember, again, at gym class, after gym class, I would actually sort of wait till everybody was gone to comb my hair. Because, I had black hair and everybody else had white hair, straight hair. And I was ashamed of my hair because I didn't want, I didn't want them to see me, combing my hair or picking, whatever I did at that point. I think I actually brushing it. And years later, I remember that scene of myself just sort of huddling by myself, combing my hair after everybody else had gone and being late for class. And it just really struck me as, wow. Not in a sad way, but recognizing that, where I was now. uh, and just having the ability to go back and recognize that my feeling of less than was no longer there.
Yeah.
So, but when I got there, I was 16.
Right. And again, even if it wasn't, necessarily strange that you had to comb your hair, the fact that you had to feel like it was
Yeah,
strange
oh yeah, yeah.
is incredible. So you have given me so much amazing stuff. I want to transition into
Sure,
honestly one more question, and then you can add on. I'll definitely give you an opportunity to add on whatever you'd like.
sure.
I mean, I know I had so many just like personal stories.
Hmm.
The main thing I would like to kind of talk about now is almost the difference in education, because I remember they
Hmm.
were telling me Bethune stopped um, around sixth grade education. Was that the case for you,
Let's say that
or
again.
was it that Bethune stopped at sixth grade education, or did
Oh,
Bethune?
it's
Okay,
1 through 12.
okay, that it may have been a different school here that they were saying after sixth grade they either had to go to
Oh yeah,
Northern.
yeah, yeah. That the kids from New RP, St. Rose, and Muntz only had schools that went from 1 to 6.
Gotcha.
And every
Okay.
year at Bethune, there's the new kids came,
Yeah.
seventh grade. So it's like an influx of new kids, mostly
Gotcha.
from 7 to 12 was Bethune. So we were all together at that point. But from first to six, it was pretty much only kids from Norco.
Right. Okay. That makes more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess what I'd like to transition to is, can you speak a bit on the difference in the level of education, having newer books, having better facilities, having just access to more resources, a band room, a football team, everything like that. And then also the importance of those things and what that means to an African American student and how that's
Yeah.
able to affect their lives?
Yeah. I mean, I quickly noticed, the textbooks right away. Because at Bethune, we got the hand-me-down textbooks from the kids from the white schools. And I was a good student at Bethune. And one of the things you got for being a good student was that you got to skip class and like do the books in the book room and, hand them out and stack them and, and, uh, and I remember, if you open up the book, it had the, list of the kids who had the book. And it was like, in every book, there was like 7 or 8 kids' names, and they weren't, any from the white schools. And every now and then we would get a new textbook. And it was a big deal for me to, wow, a new book. And when I got to Destrehan, I noticed that pretty much all the books were new, or newer. and But in terms of how it affected me, like I said, in terms of the non of everything except math, it didn't really affect me because I had been a voracious reader from the time I could read. I had a special dispensation from the bookmobile to take as many books as I want. I spent all my time reading, and I didn't consider myself to be particularly smart. I just read a lot, and so anything that required reading and retention and any kind of, you know, literary things that I was good at because if you can if you read a lot, you can probably write because you know what good writing looks like. Uh, so in like English and civics and that kind of stuff, I really got good grades. I still have my report card from 12th grade. and So in terms of academics, the books didn't really make a difference, except I guess psychologically it made a difference. Just recognizing that, oh, we got the hand-me-downs. Uh, but but I guess I wasn't surprised because from first grade we had gotten. I remember Alice and Jerry's books, and getting the ones people somebody had marked on the cover or written on the inside the book or whatever, and that's how we learned to read Alice and Jerry books from wherever they came from, and sometimes there weren't enough books, and we had to share books. Uh, but it's interesting because if that's the surroundings that you find yourself in, after a while you don't really think about it. It just becomes part of what is. Uh, it's unfortunate, but that's as a kid especially. Uh, so it didn't really affect me that much academically, except for math. I was behind in math, which I found out pretty quickly, uh, and that's why I spent the time between junior and senior year catching up, and which I did. And I ended up going to engineering school. Who would have thought it? And yeah, so I guess that's all I have to say about that particular part of it. I don't remember the second part of your question.
Okay, just the importance of having that academics belt, and especially like kind of what we were mentioning earlier, like those students who maybe didn't go to Bethune after sixth grade and stuff like that. Almost the fact that they were
Oh, okay.
um, stuck, capped at sixth grade. They either went to the workforce, they either had to commute. Some of them couldn't commute. What is really like the importance of that education system on a child in your eyes?
Oh well, I I guess I wasn't aware of what was going on with the other students from first through sixth because the only exposure I had was when the kids who were going to Bethune came to Bethune. And I didn't know any of the other kids because we didn't know them until they actually came to Bethune. And every fall there was this thing, oh, the new kids are coming in. And the bus came right down my street because Bethune was on the street I lived on. And every year there was like an influx of new students from out of town because up until then, like I said, everybody was from Norco because that's where Bethune was. Uh, and so the kids from St. Rose and New Sarpy and Mott would come, and you know, and they pretty quickly got assimilated into the school culture because it was expected, and there it wasn't anything particularly different about it. So I I wasn't even aware that there were commuter problems because you know in my lifetime, in my memory of it, they all just came on buses. There was a Mutz bus, there was a St. St. Rose bus that came in, and a New P bus, and they all came to Bethune, and that was it. And obviously, I had no knowledge of the kids that didn't come or what happened to them because they just weren't around.
Okay, yeah, sorry, maybe I'm misremembering or kind of like that
No,
detail.
it's true.
Oh,
I just like I said,
right.
uh, the, uh, it was first through six. Bethune was 1 through 12,
Mhm.
uh, but the other schools were 1 through 6. Not Norco, I don't even remember the name of it. Uh, I didn't know the names of the schools that they came from because
Right.
yeah, uh, but they were. It was great because every year there was when you go to school with the same kids for the first 6 years, you know you get to know each other almost too well.
Yeah.
And so it was just great getting to know new kids, and some of my best friends ended up being from New Sarpy, uh, band members in at Bethune. We had a kick-ass band. That's one thing I do want to mention. That was in a lot of schools, high schools, the band kids are considered like nerds, or you don't want to be a band kid. But at
Yeah.
Bethune, the, all the cool kids were in the band because, like I said, we
Yeah.
didn't have a football team. We had a
Right.
basketball team, but you know, so to be in the band was very cool, and we had a really, really good band.
Yeah.
Uh,
I'm glad
our
that
band.
hobby stayed with you for the rest of your life. That's
Oh yeah,
incredible.
yeah, oh yeah. I'm
It's
still playing.
inspiring.
uh, you probably even heard of Kid Jordan.
No, I'm not familiar,
He's a
unfortunately.
sax. Well, yeah, look him up. Kid Jordan, Mr. Edward Jordan. He's a music educator, and he's still playing in New Orleans. He
It's
does
Kid
avant-garde.
Jordan?
Yeah,
New Orleans. All right, I'm gonna do that after this call.
yeah,
I've got it in a different tab so I can
yeah. But
make sure.
that's where I learned, and a bunch of us learned to play. And
Yeah.
we'd attend band concerts, and we'd take home first prize. And we had a very small band. It was like maybe 25 kids,
All right.
because it was. And but band was the cool thing, and we took it seriously.
Yeah,
And Mr. Jordan was very, very inspirational.
that's incredible.
And yeah, so and I remember going to not necessarily band, but music contest where I have to learn a flute solo, and play in front of judges.
Hmm.
And I recall beginning of my junior year, which had been my last semester at Bethune. We went to an all-state meet, and yeah, this was in Baton Rouge, and I had one of the judges tell me that, I think you're the best high school flute player in Louisiana.
Wow.
And I said, whoa, and that was pretty good. But the band was even at Bethune was where I spent most of my time in the band room.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
So, is there anything you feel like knowing what this project is about,
yeah.
realizing that 60 years later, we need to take a look at this, like really, and realize that these people are still around us. Like this is not, some long ago in a textbook kind of thing. These are, our neighbors who were integrated into these schools. Is there anything you'd like to add to this project?
It's difficult because it was a long time ago. It was 56 years ago when I went to Destrehan. And the thing is, the culture is so different now. When this came up, and from time to time, I look at the Destrehan website, and I look, and there are black teachers. Most of the basketball team is black, and it's like, whoa, cognitive dissonance, because, you know, it obviously was not like anywhere close to that. Uh, when I was there, like coach, and it was so it's hard to even compare. It's like night and day. And there, and And of course, there was the shooting incident, which I didn't even know about until a few years ago when I started like researching it. Uh, and that was only a few years after we left. When busloads of black kids, as opposed to three, were getting off the bus in the morning. Uh, and so that struck me very powerfully. And the contrast between then and now are what I see, on online as Destrehan High versus Destrehan High then, uh, is stark, and it's like I said, it's hard to even compare because it's a whole different world from 56 years ago, and yes, it's just a different world. But like I said, I I love my time there. Uh, my one regret is that I didn't get a yearbook. I wish I had a Destrehan yearbook from '67. But I recall, the teachers being just very, very supportive. That's the thing I remember most, the teachers. Because once they realized that I was a pretty bright kid, they actually sort of pushed me.
Good.
Yeah, they did. They did. I remember one, oh, I can't remember his name now, the civics teacher, but I remember he wrote in my book, not the yearbook, he said, don't let your experience at Destrehan, what is, don't let your experience at Destrehan give you a negative worldview. I remember that worldview because I had never heard that term before then. And it was just a very, you know, clearly he thought it was worse than it was, but he thought I was, not. He thought it was very difficult that I had had a difficult time, which for the most part I did not. But just the sentiment, the thought that he would want to encourage me to go out into the world with a positive view of myself and the world, and not have anything that I experienced at Destrehan, any negative thing affect my worldview. It just meant a lot to me, and I got that energy, if not directly, by their actions and energy from just about all of my teachers.
Wow.
So that was an eye opener for me, uh, and it gave me a lot of confidence because, like I said, I was basically a big fish in a small pond at Bethune, and academically and musically. Well, not musically because they were
Oh,
actually better musicians than me at Bethune. But
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Zoom is yelling at me
Oh,
saying
okay.
apparently I've got a free account. I'm going to end this real quick, get this
All
recording,
right.
and we're gonna
Okay.
hop right back in, just like we did.
Okay.
All right.
Same link or
Yes, should be. Should be.
okay.